Well, it's my privilege to be doing the final talk on our series on life sense. This is a series that's been based on the book of Proverbs and the wisdom that that book contains. And I don't know about you, but I have learned a huge amount from this kind of lesser-known book of the Bible. And we've looked at all sorts of different issues. We've looked at if you're thinking or you're being called to marriage, how you find the right partner, how if you are married, how you should be married well. We've looked at parenting, relationships, money, jobs, all this sort of thing. And tonight, we're going to talk about the most talked about issue in the book of Proverbs. So Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21, which simply says this: the tongue has the power of life and death. The tongue has the power of life and death. In the New Testament, in the book of James, we're told that the tongue can alter the course of your life, just like the rudder alters the direction of a ship. Think of a massive supertanker, and the rudder on it is really but a very small, tiny proportion of the overall weight and size of that ship, and yet it is the rudder that changes the direction of that ship. And so there's this picture of our words, our tongues being able to alter the whole course of our lives, for good and for bad. So we're told to manage our mouths, to keep a tight rein on our tongues, to be careful with our communication. Because if we don't, we can damage our relationship with God. We can damage our relationship with each other. And we can wound and maim ourselves. And this is one of those sermons where if you feel that I'm kind of pointing at you, I'm very conscious that for one finger going out, there are three fingers pointing back at me. And I've certainly found this a real challenge to my own behavior, the way I speak, the way I come across verbally to other people. And I hope it will challenge you all likewise. So we're going to look at the specific wisdom that the book of Proverbs has to offer in this area. I'm just going to divide it very roughly into two parts: what we shouldn't do with our mouths and what we should. And so the first thing, I just want to say three things on what we shouldn't be doing with our mouths. And that's talking too much, gossiping, and making false accusations or lying. So first off, talking too much. So what does the Bible teach us about this? Proverbs chapter 10, verse 10. A chattering fool comes to ruin. Too much talk leads to sin. Be sensible and keep your mouths shut. That's from Proverbs chapter 10, verse 14. Proverbs 17. A truly wise person uses few words. Even fools are thought wise when they keep silent. With their mouths shut, they seem intelligent. And Proverbs 21. Watch your tongue and keep your mouth shut, and you will stay out of trouble. Don't all of those have such a ring of truth? And there are three lessons here. First of all is be quiet. The second one is be quiet. And the third one is definitely carry on being quiet. And the key idea, of course, behind this is if we're always talking, if we're a kind of a motor mouth and it's yakety, 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 yak the whole time, we can't be listening. We can't be thinking, we can't be reflecting, we can't be monitoring our output, we can't be surveying what the response to what we're saying is, which means that we will say things that we shouldn't say. We've all been there, we've all done it. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but I'm a talker, I'm a chatterbox. I love nothing more than chatting away and doing lots of talking. That's just who I am, I can't help it. Actually, do you know what? That's just like saying, I'm an eater. I can't help that. It's just who I am, I can't help it. But just like we can choose to eat less, we can choose to talk less. I don't know about you, but I've always been astounded how those code breakers who worked at Bletchley Park kept their mouths shut for so many decades about what was going on there and what they did. I remember at my last church, there was a lovely old lady. In fact, there were twin, very, very elderly ladies, and they had both worked at Bletchley Park. And they didn't even talk to each other about what they were doing. They both knew they were working there, but they worked in different huts. And they had not even discussed what they had done there until they were well into their 90s. So if they can do it, we should be able to do it. So that's the first thing. Then Proverbs gives us two very specific types of words to eliminate completely. And the first is gossip. Listen to these verses. Proverbs 11, verse 13. A gossip betrays a confidence, but a trustworthy person keeps a secret. Proverbs 16. Gossip separates the best of friends. And then Proverbs 26. I love this. Fire goes out without wood, and quarrels disappear when gossip stops. Now, let's be clear about what gossip is. I'm sure you all know this, but let's nail it. A gossip is someone who repeats idle talk and rumors, especially about the private or personal affairs of others. And when we gossip, we betray a confidence, meaning a confidence that had been put in us by someone else when they shared that information with us. We separate people who might have been close friends. I hear this time to time with feedback I get from my kids at school. Dad, you won't believe it. What I heard from my friend A is friend B said this about me. It's all gossip and tittle-tattle, and it causes division in relationships. It causes a wedge between people. We then slander and undermine people. We cause our rumors and innuendo to poison other people. So what gossip does is to betray a lack of integrity. You know, if you've been told something, it's for your ears only. Don't tell somebody else. It creates discord and division and negatively affects the internal spiritual world of the person who hears it. Because whether it's true or not, hearing gossip colors your judgment. It colors the way you think about the person it is about. So it affects you and it affects your relationships. You can't but help think slightly differently about that person. Now, this is really what makes the sin of gossip all that more great, because it tends to be amongst the most influential, infectious, harmful acts we can commit. So before talking, before passing information on, stop and ask yourself, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it going to build the person up? And is it encouraging? And if it fails even one of those questions, just don't say it. The next set of words to stop are lies. Now, I'm sure you would all agree with me here, but a quick tour of what Proverbs has to tell us about lies. The Lord hates a lying tongue, a false witness who pours out lies. That's Proverbs chapter 6. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in those who tell the truth. Proverbs 12. Here's a powerful one. Telling lies about others is as harmful as hitting them with an axe, wounding them with a sword, or shooting them with a sharp arrow. And if we're honest, we all tell lies. Every day, perhaps not whacking great big whopping lies, perhaps little white lies, but lies certainly. Will, you've put on weight, I see. No, I haven't, I say. How was your quiet time this morning? How's your Bible reading going? Did you have your time with the Lord praying this morning? Of course I did, yeah. My Bible reading plan is going really well, and I'm completely up to date with it. It's so easy. According to a study, apparently 91% of people confess that they regularly lie in some shape, way, or form. Do you know what apparently this study says people lie about the most? It's how much you weigh, lying about money. I guess that could be in the context. So tell me, how much do you earn? Well, I add a couple of zeros on the end. And your age is the third. Okay? I'm 56, by the way, and that is true. Okay, now, here is what the most intriguing thing about that study is. And it was that people don't care about lying anymore. People accept it. It doesn't apparently bother too many people. We don't get that upset when someone falsifies, fabricates, or misrepresents the truth. In fact, studies show that over half of us don't even think that lying is wrong. But it is. In fact, did you catch what God had to say about how he felt about lying? Proverbs 6, the Lord hates a lying tongue. Proverbs 12, the Lord detests lying lips. Those are harsh words of condemnation. God hates, God detests. And the reason why God hates and God detests is because God is truth. That is his very nature. And of course, we can lie outright, we can embellish our CV, we can fiddle the books, but there's another way we can do it, which is much more insidious. We can distort things, we can put a spin on things, we can misquote somebody. This is what all this false news furore in the news is at the moment. This recent spat when apparently MPs had voted through this thing that the animals are not sentient. They have no feelings. They don't feel pain. Apparently, it was completely untrue, but it kind of got out there and had a spin put on it, and before you knew where it was, the Twitter net was completely alive with it. You can slander somebody's reputation. You can make an accusation full of half-truths or spread innuendo. You can tell a certain story in a particular way to discredit someone, even using the same words, but perhaps just lifting one of your eyebrows just to indicate that you don't quite believe what you're saying. We can bend the truth. We can spin the truth. And then, of course, we can exaggerate. We can intentionally inflate statistics. Danny and I went on a conference for the leaders of large Anglican churches, and it was just like all the church leaders were in the room. So how big is your church? Well, mine's 300. Yeah, we were at 300 a few years ago. And how big was your church? And the temptation to ours is 500. 500 when we have 5 services, or our church is 800 on Christmas Eve when we have 2 Christian services. The temptation is there to exaggerate. We can embellish past accomplishments. And then, for example, in marriage counseling, we can use terms like you never, you always, those infamous words from marriages when they are simply not true. And then there's the worst lie of all. This is really important. Listen to this one. This is the one that does the most damage and causes the most pain. It's when we lie to ourselves. It's when we say, I don't have a drink problem. This is just social drinking. Yes, I can quite happily down a bottle of scotch every day, but it's not a problem for me. I'm not an alcoholic. You tell yourself that everything's okay when it's not. There is no lie that is more destructive in your life than this one. It's telling yourself that you're a great father, as your children erupt in rebellion against you. It's telling yourself that your marriage is fantastic, as your spouse walks out on you. It's telling yourself that it's always the other person's fault. It's always the company's fault, their policies, their structures. The managing directors are just useless. They don't know how to do their job. That's why I keep on jumping from job to job, and I haven't held a job for more than 6 months in the last 10 years. It's always somebody else's fault. You lie to yourself. It's telling yourself that you're in good shape just before the heart attack comes. Lying to yourself is the most destructive form of lying of all because it can cause you the most harm. God knows it, which is why God says, tell the truth. Tell the truth to those around you and tell the truth to yourself. Now, that's all quite negative, okay? That's lots of finger wagging, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other. But what should we do? Let's look at the opposite side of what I've been talking about. What can we say that brings life? What can we say? What sort of words are they that heal, not wound, that build up instead of tear down? Well, here's a sample of the wisdom on that from Proverbs chapter 12. Some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing. Proverbs 15. Kind words heal and help. Cutting words wound and maim. From Proverbs 16. Kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. Isn't that a great picture? And in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul wrote these words from Ephesians chapter 4. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. So just before we look at what life-giving words look like, I just want to show you what they don't look like so you're absolutely clear of the difference. Now, I absolutely love Winston Churchill. I think he was one of the greatest people who's ever lived. And one of the greatest conflicts of all time on a personal level, we're not talking World War level here, was that between Winston Churchill and a woman called Lady Astor. And it's fairly well known to historians that the two didn't get on. So, for example, one day, Lady Astor said, "Sir Winston, if I were married to you, I'd put poison in your coffee." To which Churchill replied, "Lady Astor, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." Now, criticism can be life-taking. Now, you could say that she deserved that, okay? But I wouldn't be surprised if she'd gone away and was quite hurt by that. See, criticism can be life-taking if it's not given in a godly way. In fact, unkind, critical words can be like curses over you. Many of us here will have had words spoken over us, perhaps from early childhood, perhaps much more recently. Words like, "You're useless," "You're good for nothing," "You're dumb," "You'll never add up to anything," "No one is ever going to love you," "You're an idiot," "You're stupid." And these sorts of words can exert a hold over us all of our lives. Don't speak to people like that, and especially parents here, never, ever, ever on any account speak to your children like that. For criticism to be constructive, it needs to be more than just an assessment. It needs to be solution-based. The person needs to feel supported and served. Otherwise, all you're doing is fault-finding. It's like taking your garage. My lovely Audi went in for an MOT, and there was like 3 pages of reasons why it had failed its MOT. Just a long list of criticism of sweet Audrey, which is what we call the Audi. And now, we were then told what to do with it. But can you imagine if you went into a garage and all you were told, your car's this, your car's that, it's no good, it's going to fail, it's a failure, that's wrong, that. And then they never said, but the good news is we can fix all that. So ask yourself, am I complaining and critiquing, or am I helping and encouraging? Here's a test. Is what I'm going to say going to build that person up, or is it going to tear them down? Will it offer a pathway to success, or will it rub their faces in failure? Is it filled with grace and understanding, or judgment and condemnation? And if it's the latter of any of those, you're probably saying it to get one over the person and to make yourself feel better. If your motivation is to help this person, then you need to keep to the former of all those categories. There's a big difference between constructive criticism and destructive criticism. Now, okay, so those are an example of some words that take life. So what sort of words give life? The verses we read out earlier told us that too. Let's take another look. The mouth of a good person is a deep, life-giving well. Isn't that a wonderful picture? Remember, a dry, arid land, wells were incredibly important. They were life-giving. They were life-sustaining. So the mouth of a good person, the mouth of a Christian, your mouths, our mouths, should be like a life-giving well. The words of the wise bring healing. Now, there are obviously many kinds of words that build up and encourage, but there are two specifically mentioned in these verses, words that give life and words that heal. So first, words that give life. To give life is to inspire, is to encourage. In fact, that's the literal meaning of inspiration. It means to breathe into someone, to say things that spur them on to even greater things, to keep going, to keep trying, to keep moving. Words that give life energy. I mentioned my hero Churchill earlier. Few have used words to inspire better than Winston Churchill. It was said that his words alone kept Britain standing during World War II. Here is an example of some of his most famous words which rallied the nation. Interesting, we probably all know those words. They weren't delivered in Parliament in the most kind of rousing way, were they? But they are still pure gold. And that was a real turning point after Dunkirk, when we were feeling demoralized, and he really rallied the nation behind him. So that's just an example of words that give life. I'm sure you can all think of other examples. I hope everyone here can think of a time when someone has spoken words of life into your own lives. I also suspect that there will be some here who've never heard inspirational words spoken to them. And finally, there are healing words, soothing balm, words of forgiveness and restoration. Let me just illustrate that with a little story from my own past. I was very happily married, and I did a tour of duty in Northern Ireland, which was 6 months away, but then you had 2 months training, and before that, there was a whole load of months where you were hardly ever home because you were always going away doing different courses and stuff. So basically, you didn't really see your other half for a year. And my late wife really, really struggled with that. Really struggled with it. And we got back, and it's always bizarre when you've been away. It's like your wife is a stranger. Your wife or your spouse, has created their own life while you've been away, and suddenly you come back, and it's awkward. It's really, really awkward at the end of a long period of separation. Anyway, we got back, and she said, I don't think I could go through that again. And she said, if you get sent to Northern Ireland again, if you want to value our marriage, I think you should be prepared to look for another job. And I said, I completely understand that, and she was much more important than my career was. So I said, I'll resign. I'll resign. And so we got, we made up, and then we went off to Germany. It was a new life. It was really exciting. I had little tanks. I was an armored warrior commander, cabbing around, sitting out of a turret of a tank. It was huge fun. And it was like we'd only been there 5 minutes. And there was a disaster in Northern Ireland, and they needed a unit to go out there at short notice. And so we were warned off for an operational tour back in Northern Ireland, having just moved my wife and the dog. It was in the days, when quarantine and stuff. And she said to me, well, of course, you're going to resign, aren't you? And I said, well, I can't, because it's an emergency deployment, and there's an embargo on anybody leaving, because otherwise there'd be like a mass exodus. I can't resign. And we then had, it was another tour. It was extended for 2 months when we were out there. There was a big drama out there. And so instead of being a 6-month tour, it was an 8-month tour. And to cut a long story short, about 2 years after that, 2 days before she died, we were standing alone in our garden in Wiltshire. And we'd had the most amazing day. And she just said, there was a time when I never thought I would love you as much as I used to love you. But you know what? I love you even more now than I did at the start of those dreadful 2 tours. And then she complimented me. She said, you're a lovely husband, you're a great dad to the kids. I'm just so excited about the rest of our lives together. You're everything that I wanted, because she'd been, her previous boyfriend was really disgustingly rich and, all that. And I guess I'd had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder that I didn't live in a stately home and all, and all the rest of it. And she said, I just love the fact that you're very low key and you're, she just complimented. These are words of healing, great words of healing. And they were amongst the last words I heard her say to me. And the amazing thing is not only did she bring healing over those years of real emotional hardship through repeated periods of separation, but after she died, they allowed my emotional healing to happen much faster, because there was nothing that was left unsaid. She had said it all. I knew that I had been the husband that she wanted me to be. I knew she'd forgiven me for not resigning. Not that I could have done, but, she'd forgiven me. And her words were words of balm, were words of soothing, and were words of healing. And that's just a lovely example. Have you fallen out with somebody in the past where you perhaps could now see them and speak to them and give those words of healing? Are you yearning to hear those words of healing? In a moment, we're going to have some time to pray, but I just wanted to wrap up by saying, remember, words are hugely powerful. Watch what you say. We are a church family here. I love this church family. But I know I have upset some people here tonight because I have said things I shouldn't have said. And if I'm honest, some of you have hurt me as well. But I guess that's my job as a vicar, just to, take it on the chin. But we're family, and we should be liberal with our words that build one another up, with our words that bring healing. If you don't have something nice to say, zip it. Just don't say it. If you're worried about something that you feel you might need to share with somebody, then if you're really concerned that you may be creating too much of an issue, then perhaps seek some wise counsel from another Christian friend. Don't gossip. Don't slander. Don't lie. Try not to spin or bend the truth. And above all, don't lie to yourself. Use your words to bring life and healing.